This video may or may not be entirely inspired by this tweet, and I just hope you will forgive me for the absolute tangent I'm about to go on because of these two words and this man being ingrained in my mind together forever. A good villain is a key component to any good story. In fact, without the villain, there likely would be no story at all. Unlike the hero, the villain is usually seen as a delinquent of sorts, someone that doesn't quite fit in with society's standards and/or expectations. They stand out in unique and oftentimes interesting ways. A well-written villain is a good story in and of itself, and our obsession with some of these villains is really just our own infatuation with the different and unknown. So, it's no surprise that some idols will adopt this identity on stage. Today, I have 4 idols that I think have perfectly embodied this role, and I will personally tell their stories for them. Buckle your seatbelts, put on your masks, and get ready for a chilling ride. Gahyeon in Dreamcatcher as a whole is a very interesting one for a few different reasons. For one, out of all the groups here, Dreamcatcher is the only one whose music has consistently laid out a specific character in it. Their horror concept allows all 7 of the girls to lean into some more specific character traits. Whether it's the chilling doll-like atmosphere that Hondong brings with her performances, or the overwhelming power that someone like Sua has on stage. Each and every one of these girls has a part to play, though I don't think any of them have quite built up this character in the same way Gahyeon has. Gahyeon's role as the villain didn't start until about their Scream era. Scream was the start of something a little bit different from Dreamcatcher. Their concept up until that point had backed the girls into a corner. They were the scared girls that couldn't escape. They were the prey. However, Scream brings a more powerful and demanding presence to their music. They decided to fight back. Now, instead of being scared, they are something to be feared. They are no longer an easy prey, trapped in the spider's web, but rather a wolf's in sheep clothing. This is where Gahyeon's character starts to develop. She doesn't have the same powerful aura as someone like Sion or Dami has, nor can she do a lot with very little in the same way Hondong and Jiyu can. Instead, she's the perfect in-between. The conduit, if you will. She's the balance between Dreamcatcher's horror-infused concept and their more powerful appearance. Gahyeon is interesting when it comes to the villains because the narcissistic and greedy attributes don't exactly apply to her. In fact, no human greed does at all, really. Unlike the others whose characters on this list actively try to hog the attention and gain something from it, Gahyeon doesn't. Her performance style is interesting in that sense. While everyone else is attention-grabbing, even when the attention isn't actively on them, Gahyeon isn't. She's a blank space, but it never feels boring. Her expressions are cold and blank, she lacks any attitude whatsoever, and it aids in her spirit-like consciousness. However, when the attention is on her, quite honestly, she turns into a badass. She's playful and alluring, borderline sensual at times. She knows how to tease the camera, and her confidence is boosted when all attention is on her. It's almost as if she's possessed by something. The cold and otherwise expressionless girl turns into a beast when she's needed. Her body language becomes fluid, and she gathers all the attention to herself before passing it on once again to somebody else. She's the perfect support, the channel in which the others speak through. Despite having seemingly no human emotions, Gahyeon's villain is one of the most terrifying out there and absolutely a force to be reckoned with. When I say this man is a walking DC villain, I mean it. There is so much hatred and menace on full display in his performances that I actually get chills watching him. And yet, his performance never feels like too much. I'd even say they're pretty tame. His more mature and attractive appearance gives him a rather charming exterior. However, when his face morphs into something a little more deranged, you realize that you too have been fooled by his charisma. Junhyung's descent into villainy actually has a bit of a backstory. While he had always been one of the more memorable performers of Ghost 9, Control was the first time we really saw his character bleed through. I think part of it was the fact that the horror concept just really suits him, but I also think a lot of it was him taking over a big hole left in the group after 2 members left. He really stepped up his game for Control, playing not only his position, but both of theirs as well. Junhyung on stage is the definition of greed. His character craves the spotlight. His bold and powerful movements practically beg for it, yet the elegance and fluidity in them make it seem as if he's impossible to catch. I love how he's not afraid to look away from the camera. His eyes follow his every movement. It makes it seem less like he's the one putting on a performance and more like we're the ones watching him. And yet, there's an ever-present smirk on his face, hinting at the fact that he knows we're there. Junhyung also has a huge ego when performing. Narcissism is an almost necessary trait for such a domineering performer such as himself, but he takes it to a whole new level. He makes the rest of Ghost 9 look like backup dancers. Even when the rest of them try to copy his moves, it just feels like a cheap imitation. He is by far the most charming person on stage when it comes to their performances, and he knows it. He uses that confidence to his advantage. His charms are amplified by his good looks, and he's not afraid to show them off. He's rowdy and menacing, but he could get himself out of any trouble with a simple smile, and he knows it. He's the type of villain you don't see coming, the kind you almost even fall in love with by the time the movie's over. If Gahyeon is the balance of her group, Junhyung is the piece that topples it over completely. He absolutely makes their performances, but the others rely on him to a fault, especially when it comes to these darker concepts like control. Gahyeon is Dreamcatcher's secret weapon. She fights right alongside them, making them stronger. However, Junhyung feels more like a lone wolf, tormenting whoever and whatever he pleases. He's the definition of narcissism, and that what makes his villain so intriguing. I feel as if a lot of people would say someone like Ryujin or Yeji fits these darker concepts a lot more, while Yuna and Chaedong fit the brighter ones. And while I agree Yuna is a lot of fun on tracks like Icy and Sneakers, I think she's also amazing in this style of music as well. Mafia is the first and only Itzy song to fully flesh out any character at all, and needless to say, Yuna saw her only chance and took it. One of the reasons Yuna is so lovely in Itzy's brighter concepts is because she never falters. She has loads of energy to dispel onto these tracks, and all with a bright, happy smile setting upon her face. Her attitude is the same when in center position as it is when she is in the very back. It's not quite greed like the others, just a steady flow of unwavering desire to perform well. She's fun to watch because she's easy to watch. She makes Itzy's high-energy choreographies look like a walk in the park, and her easy movements are always precise. She commands attention naturally, sometimes likely not even realizing she's doing it. Mafia, though, brought out a whole new side out of her. There was something to be greedy for now, something to want. It's a dark and demanding concept, and the simple, easygoing Yuna we knew before just isn't going to work anymore. She drops her smile in exchange for a sinister smirk, and the once bright and lovable Yuna changes into something a bit more sinister. She commends all eyes to her own, demanding your attention away from anything and everyone else. Her lines are still very playful and teasing, but the desired effect this time is much, much different. Her moves are more precise and thought out in this era. Like everything she does has a second meaning behind it. She comes off as untrustful, as if she's always after her own personal motives. Her once sharp movements have a slant to them now, slowly drawing your attention to the next one instead of just having it pop up out of nowhere. If eyes are the windows to the soul, then the mouth is the piece that lies in sabotage. Yuna learns to use that same million-dollar smile in a different way here. Here, instead of welcoming, it's discouraging. It paints a pretty little picture of deception, and without ever even saying a word, Yuna spews lies of loyalty all over the stage. Unlike Junhyung and Gahyeon, Yuna neither works against or with the members of Itzy. Even though these girls are working together to put on a performance, all 5 of them have different reasons for performing, much like the real story of the underworld. Itzy is so much fun to watch because all of them have their own different attributes. None of them match each other completely, but none of them are so different that they have to make their own way either. Yuna was the only one in this era that I feel fully expended upon this commanding character the song sings for. She becomes the boss of this party, and her commanding presence really leaps through the screen in this one. If you've ever heard literally any DKZ song, you're probably wondering what in the hell any of them are doing on this list. DKZ are known for their bright and rather quirky songs, and even on the few occasions that they did delve into something a bit darker, it was never nearly as heavy as any of the other examples on this list. However, Lupin managed to surprise me in more ways than one, and Jaechan was absolutely one of them. To talk about Jaechan though, we first have to talk about his group as a whole. The original 5 members of Dongy's put on some of the most amazing performances I have ever seen. From their early debut days, even at such a young age, all 5 of them were so fully fleshed out as performers, it was insane. I genuinely believe Dongy's as a whole were one of the greatest performing acts K-pop has ever seen, both as a group and as individuals, and I could probably dedicate a whole video to each individual member. But to narrow it down a bit, all you really need to know is that each one of them had their own very unique style when it came to performing, and Jaechan's was all in his charisma. The rest of Dongy's, while still very different from one another, were also very powerful. Many of them flourished in their bright and quirky style of music. However, Jaechan kind of had to make his own way. His performance style was a bit more subdued than the rest of them. He's very sensual when on stage, and his eyes hold all of his power. His movements aren't nearly as bold as the others, and his best attributes come from his confident but calm charisma. He was like a breath of fresh air in Dongy's earlier concepts, shying away from the others' overwhelming personas. However, Lupin brought a new look to Dongy's as a whole, and the once calm and collected Jaechan secretly turned into a deviant villain seemingly overnight. Lupin, as a song, is already overflowing with a sleek attitude. Its sharp but complex choreography is toned down a bit from their other releases, but it's twice as powerful as anything before. Lupin brings out Jaechan's best qualities as a performer. It saw Jaechan's potential and turned him into something sinister, using his own overflowing charms against him. But Jaechan is a slippery one. He never once loses his calm and collective composure. As his character develops, he never once lets people in on the secret. He slowly descends into madness, yet those around him are completely clueless. He's another one of the great narcissists of K-pop, but you would never know just by looking at him. He's almost scarily good at hiding his greed, and it makes his character that much more despicable. Beautiful is another great example of Jaechan's emerging character. While the song is a bit less charming than Lupin, it doubles up on the more sensual aspect of music, and that too is Jaechan's calling. While Lupin was such an interesting and iconic era for the group as a whole, I can't quite say one member owned it entirely. I can absolutely say Beautiful was Jaechan's era. His sleek, clean performing style matches the meaning of the song perfectly, and his emerging villain added an extra, more intense layer to his performance that the song was calling for. As I said before, these 5 guys are all amazing performers in their own right, but Jaechan is the only one I can confidently say has the greed needed to make a good villain, and he will always remain as Dongy's secret villain. And that is the end of our story for now. I really hope you enjoyed this. It was so much fun to make. A lot of these idols are some of my favorite performers out there, and I'm so glad I found a way to get to talk about some of them in this light. Let me know if there's anyone you think I missed as well. I really contemplated adding Moonbin to this list, especially because of Who earlier this year. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed, and as always, I will see you next time, travelers.